Hey guys, my name is Ben, and welcome back to another episode of the MGN Destiny series Enemies Explained, where I strip away the hitboxes and the bare bones information and reveal the greater story, characteristics, and names behind the enemies that you slay by the hundreds day in and day out. In this chapter, I'll be digging into the information that we have available about the Scorn. For the first time, I'll be discussing a completely non-traditional Fallen faction. Every aspect of their biology, society, and characteristics are completely unique, so this should be pretty interesting. When we look at the origin and the identity of the Scorn, we have to begin with how the first one came to be, and this brings us to Fikrul, an outcast Fallen Archon. Fikrul and the Fallen that were with him at the time, they had been ambushed by a team of Guardians, and they were specifically stated to have been farming Fallen, so they didn't really have a valid reason apart from grinding gear, I guess. His dying body will be found by the awoken Prince Uldren Sov, and after Uldren unwittingly used the power of the Ahamkara Riven, he would heal Fikrul. In healing Fikrul, Uldren would actually create a new form of ether, and this would be known as a dark ether. Fikrul now became known as the Fanatic in his rebirth, and he would have the ability to use the dark ether to raise any fallen from the dead, and so that is how the Scorn came to be. So what are Scorn? In their most simplest version, they are zombie fallen. That's basically it. Uldren would take the Fanatic and the Scorn to Mars. There he would betray and destroy the House of Kings. Now, I talked about this in my House of Kings video and article, in my House of Dusk video and article. Basically, Krask took Uldren in, and Uldren stabbed him in the back, and this is exactly how he did it. The Fanatic himself would personally cut off the two lower arms of the Kell of the House of Kings, Krask. Now, why would he do this? I touched on this in my House of Devils video and article about how dregs have their lower two arms docked. Not just, the ether rationing, but they have their lower two arms cut off, and it's a sign of humiliation and a reminder to them of their place in society. Now, Krask was dead at that stage. Well, he was going to be. There was no real point. It's not like he was going to be made into a dreg. But that act of cutting off his two lower arms still served as a vicious sign of humiliation before he died. With Krask's death, the House of Kings would fall, and this fall would see the beginning of the decline for the House of Dusk. And that would be that. I touched on that actually in my House of Dusk video. House of Kings were the final traditional Fallen house as well. And as we'll be looking at further on in this video, the Scorn also had a hand in putting the final nail in the coffin for other houses as well. So now that the House of Kings were dead, Fikrul would take the dead Fallen of the House of Kings and he would raise them back up. That is why when you fight the Scorn, you'll actually see they wear the color yellow in whatever clothes they do wear. And that is because the majority of them came from the House of Kings. Now, they have no memories, most likely, or allegiances. I'm not too sure how this works, but it's simply a reminder of what happened on Mars. So after all this happened, Uldren would take the Fanatic and the Scorn, and he would use them and this new army he had to search for his sister, the Queen of the Awoken, Mara Sov. I believe I talked about this in a previous... I can't remember which house it was now, but I talked about how the Awoken tried to stop Oryx in the battle above Saturn. And the Awoken got wiped out, and it was pretty much assumed by everybody that the Queen was dead. However, Uldren would hear voices in his head, and he would feel... He had a kind of psychic connection in a way with his sister. It's an Awoken thing, I don't really know how to explain it, but that connection was still there, and he was also hearing voices in his head, and he was kind of getting nudges to take certain actions, if I can put it pretty simply. So, while everybody else was assuming that the Queen was dead, Uldren was adamantly searching for his sister, and he would use the Scorn as an army to brute force his way across the system looking for her. And as time went on, he began to slowly, lose his sanity. His hatred for the Guardians got involved, and basically he began wreaking havoc. Over time, the Scorn leadership would be captured, and eventually Uldren himself would be captured, and all of them together would be imprisoned in the Awoken's Prison of Elders. Now, a key player that was involved in helping secure the captivity of these, I guess, I don't know what you want to call them, but the Scorn and Uldren, A key player in this who helped out was actually Cade 6. Cade 6 was a friend of the Awoken in the sense that whenever they needed help, he oftentimes tended to be the guy that actually showed up, if not the only guy that would show up. So Uldren and the Scorn, for a time, would remain in the Prison of Elders. After a while, the Warden of the Prison of Elders, Varix, and I touched on this in my House of Judgment video and article, Varix wanted to go to Europa to join the House of Salvation in Aramis, and he needed a distraction. So as the Warden, he had control of the prison defenses and security systems, and so he released all of the prisoners, and in doing so, he released Uldren and the Scorn, and this action unfortunately resulted in the death of Cade 6. After their escape from the Prison of Elders, the Scorn would slaughter hundreds of Awoken before settling on the nearby Tangled Shore for a time. Now, before I continue on with the general story and the history of the Scorn, if you haven't been able to tell already, this is very much tying in with the story of the Forsaken Campaign. If, you know, it is the Forsaken Campaign, but I'm going to move away from that and I'm going to examine their physical characteristics along with their leadership. Appearance-wise, the Scorn are grey, and they have a very decayed look to them. And this is a reminder that their bodies are dead, and it's a very unnatural thing that they're alive. The Dark Ether that sustains them, again, this isn't a natural thing, it's a very corruptive substance, and it is twisting them and kind of controlling them like puppets. This can especially be seen in the sheer unnatural size of the abominations, and also in the shriveled forms of the Screeps. I love that word. In terms of the Scorn hierarchy, I know for a fact that it operates differently to the normal Fallen. So in life, Fikrul was made an outcast specifically because of his disdain for the system, so I don't think that the Scorn are raised or lowered depending on their status. It's similar to how, you know, the Dregs or Vandals were, or an opposite to that. However, there are many different variations of Scorn, so apart from the Abominations or Screeps, which are extreme variants, I'd say the others are simply whatever size they happen to be at death. So a Scorn would be roughly the size of a Dreg if he died as a Dreg, for example. And this brings us into the variations of the Scorn enemies, so we'll get looking at that now. First off, we have the Chieftain. The Chieftain is the highest ranking Scorn beneath the Scorn Barons. They are the equivalent of Fallen Captains, except they have the ability to throw down 3 different types of totems. Solar Totems act as a flamethrower, Arc Totems tether and draw nearby enemies in, and Void Totems shield allies. Chieftains have different types of shields, as a lot of, you know, enemies across different races do, depending on the difficulty of the activity you're doing, but I think their base shield is Arc, also similar to the Captains. Next up, we've got the Abominations. And as I mentioned by their size, it's kind of easy to understand that they share a similar role as the Hive Ogres. They are large brutes, and they launch arc energy from their hands. They also have the ground pound ability if an enemy gets too close, but that's pretty much it, and they're fairly easy to take down. Raiders are similar to Fallen Vandals. They can fight in close ranges and long ranges. Combatants that fight at close range will use rifles that fire ricocheting saw blades around the place, and then the longer range guys will use a Void sniper rifle. I think it's called the Scorn crossbow, I'm not too sure on that. A Raider can dissolve into a mist of dark ether, and they use this ability to reposition to a safer location. They can't be targeted in that state, they can only be followed. Wraiths are a larger unit, they're larger than most of the other Scorn variants. They're a strictly melee unit. They will wield 2 torches and rush towards their target, often relying on strength and numbers. Yikes, my voice sounded like a 40-year-old smoker there for a second, yikes. There are the Stalkers, who are resurrected dregs. They wield arc pistols, and they are the most common Scorn enemy. Next up we have the Lurker. The Lurker is a subclass of the Stalker. They will have a solar pistol along with a round metal shield that will block any attacks. It's similar to the Phalanx, I guess, with the Cabal. Then we have the Ravager. The Ravager is a weaker unit. They carry flaming sensors, and these swing around to create a fiery explosion when they strike the ground with them. This weapon also happens to be the unit's weakness. If you shoot it, it'll explode in their faces, and yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Finally, we have the Screeps. They're the smallest units of the Scorn army, and they are most similar to the Cursed Thralls. They have shriveled bodies, they crawl on all fours, and they have large ulcers protruding from their abdomens, and these are filled with dark ether. If they are close to an enemy, the ulcers will explode, and yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Above all of these variants are the Barons, and the Barons are the second in command to Fikrul the Fanatic. These characters are hunted down, or they would be hunted down, by the Guardian during the Forsaken campaign, and these are the Scorn Barons. Elicris, the Machinist, carries the most authority besides the Fanatic, and is extremely skilled when it comes to technology. She scavenged technology from multiple races, including the Awoken, and used them all in increasing her potency with her arsenal. She wields a Scorched Cannon, along with a back-mounted rocket launcher. Pretty cool stuff. Then there's Hirax, the Mindbender. This is my favorite guy. He used to be a Dreg of the House of Exile on the Moon. I actually mentioned him in my House of Exile video and article. Whether out of desperation or just by accident, I mean, it depends on how intelligent he was, I don't know, he fell into the Hellmouth. However, instead of dying, he returned with a hive army at his back. What we do know about how this works is that Hirax uses technology to control the hive. So, to a certain extent, it's artificial. He mind controls them to fight for him. However, we also know that to a certain extent, his connection to them is more than artificial. Once on the Tangled Shore, Hirax would find a crashed hive ship, and he would make the hive wizard In Anan his consort, and together they would create a new brood of the hive on the Tangled Shore. Hirax would also learn to create a throne world, which is pretty impressive. As far as I'm aware, he is the first non-hive being to do this. And how to explain the throne world? Well, it's basically a pocket dimension. Let's just put it like that. A being who has a throne world can't be properly killed unless it's in their throne world, so the player character during the campaign would be forced to enter the Mindbender's realm in order to properly defeat him. So, okay, let's get some fun facts in here. When you enter the throne world, because it's his domain, Hirax became much larger and much more powerful. At the same time, the size of your throne world is based off of the power of the beings you slay. And him slaying Cade 6 vastly increased the size of his throne world, so that says a lot about Cade 6. I thought I'd just add that in there. After Hirax was killed, later on down the line, a team of Guardians would be sent to clean up the mess that he made with his mate, and they would kill her and the brood. Araskis the Trickster. She was most known for her traps and sabotages. During her time on the Tangled Shore, she successfully began the production of explosive exotic engrams, and these would have been nasty if they had found their way to the tower. I can imagine a load of people would have died from that. She also looted the treasure room of the Prison of Elders. If you did the Prison of Elders activity back in D1, you would know about that room. Or, I mean, if you did the Warden of Nothing strike, you would have also encountered that. And she sabotaged the chest with an energy shield that would trap anybody who opened it. When she was eventually confronted by the player character, she would litter her trail with tampered heavy ammo that would explode if picked up. Pretty crafty. Next we've got Rex's Vaughn, the Hangman. He was an executioner, and as a Scorn, he continued to act on his hatred for servitors. He captured and destroyed as many as he could, and on the Tangled Shore, many caged and destroyed servitors could be found. Vaughn used a flaming cauldron as a weapon, and this acted similarly to the sensors that the Ravagers would use. A fun fact about him is that he is actually responsible for destroying the last of the House of Wolves servitors, meaning they can never return in their traditional form. Canix, the Mad Bomber, was just, he was insane. I think that's kind of it, yeah. Apart from that, I mean, he was a demolitions expert. Scorn grenades were his primary weapons of choice, and he was very similar to Araskis in that he would lure people into traps, and he would mislead them with lies in order to get the upper hand. Then we have Pirha, the Rifleman. Now Pirha, he was an elite marksman. He was also the one responsible for the death of Cade 6's ghost, Sundance. Pirha used hologram technology, and this allowed him to appear as though he was in multiple locations at once. It is rumored, and need to stress this enough, it is rumored that he used a bullet from a weapon of sorrow for Cade's ghost, but this isn't confirmed. I can't confirm that, but I just know that it is a rumor out there. If it's true, it would certainly raise a lot of questions, and it would certainly make sense as to why Sundance got one hit, but that's that. Finally, we've got Yavix, the rider. She was the leader of a crew of pike riders, and she was only defeated after Cade Six outmaneuvered her on his Sparrow. She would swear revenge on him ever since that day, and in terms of goals, she desired anarchy above all else. She established a kind of form of that on the Tangled Shore, and I guess her long-term goal was to see anarchy move from the Tangled Shore into the rest of fallen society. This leads us now to the current state of the Scorn. So that is all the characteristics and the hierarchies and all that out of the way. Let's go back to the story. What happened to the Scorn? By the end of the Forsaken campaign, the Scorn Barons had been slain, along with Uldren Sov at the hands of Petrovenge. The Dreaming City had also been discovered, and so what was left of the Scorn attempted to invade it. Now, I'm not too sure what their goal was. I think they just kind of felt like it. They're zombie fallen, man. I don't know. They were met with heavy resistance from the Awoken, obviously, and then after Riven unleashed her curse on the Dreaming City, they would also fight against the Taken as well. The Scorn in the Dreaming City, they are trapped within the curse, similar to the Awoken. This means that every 3 weeks, the exact same events will occur for them. Now, unlike the Awoken, they are not aware of this reset, and so they unknowingly do the same thing every day for 3 weeks. They're not aware of this at all. And as a result of the curse, of course, they cannot be fully killed either. There are still, of course, plenty of Scorn on the Tangled Shore, and I think this is as a result of the Fanatic being there. We killed him at the end of the Forsaken campaign, and there's also a strike where we kill him. However, I think it's just kind of a thing that he's still alive. I can't explain it. I don't know. He's still there, and so are they. So, what is the state of the Scorn? Dreaming City, they're trapped. No longer a threat. Tangled Shore, crippled. No longer a threat. And yeah, that's everything that you certainly need to know about the Scorn, and then some. If you want to know more about the other fallen factions or houses, be sure to check out the other videos/articles I've made on the Destiny 2 MGN YouTube channel and website. If there are any questions you have about anything in the Destiny universe, please ask in a comment, and I will answer you. Until the next time, my friends, take care.